Okay, then. Hopefully we're all good and everyone's coming along who's already here. So, thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about the evolution of cybersecurity and protecting your data. There is a Q&A session that's as a part of Zoom meetings, so feel free to leave questions. And at the end, I'll attempt to answer them all, hopefully. But actually, hopefully, I've answered them in the content. But I'll do a little session at the end. So if you do think of anything during the presentation, during the webinar, feel free and we'll address them at the end. So, quick introduction. Hopefully. Yep, so my name's Matt Riley. I'm the Quality and Compliance Director here at Complete IT. And I also have a secondary role at Sharp, which is Complete IT's parent company, and I'm our data protection lead for Sharp in the UK. I've been with Complete IT just under 8 years now, and prior to joining Complete IT, I was in the NHS. So, funny enough, this whole data protection piece, information security, cybersecurity has sort of been in my veins in my entire working life. And I've had the opportunity over the last year to really dig much deeper into cybersecurity and information security in general. So we will try and cover 4 areas of today. Where we have come from on this journey to getting to where we are today. What you need to understand in your organization to help you put together what you're going to be doing around cybersecurity, data protection, etc. Then we'll go into how you can protect your business through 7 points I've put together, top level points that you can go and do. And finally, sort of touch on the latest threats and trends that we've seen very recently. And one actually was the day before yesterday. It was slightly new to us. So we'll cover off those as well. And again, any questions, feel free to put them in the window. I'll happily have a try and go through them at the end. So to start off with, a sort of look at where we've come from. And I wanted to show you this. So a proposal I put together for one of our clients early 2015. And this was, they're going to be their server infrastructure and how it was backed up and how they'd be accessing it remotely. And it was the first proposal I think I'd written that had Microsoft Office 365 in it. But what you're looking at here really is everything is in, with the exception of emails, everything is one place. Everything is in your office. Everything is, you could go and hug it if you really wanted to, or you'd have it securely away, locked in the server cabinet in the server room overnight. But that data was in your control. So cybersecurity at the time really was just about blocking access to get into that network, and where you've got all your laptops, desktops, etc., making sure that they were adequately protected. So we're really talking cybersecurity at this point was 2 points: how to get in the front door, making sure it's nice and secure, and for each of our devices, making sure that they had antivirus on them. I mean, you can tell how old this was. At the bottom in this proposal, it mentions 3G technology. So it's amazing how far we've come in 5 years. So again, this meant everything was nice and controlled. But where we are today and the protections that we need to put into place are vastly different. And again, a lot of businesses in the SME sector will still have setups up like this, but that cloud element of where else we store data has grown a bit from, again, I didn't put it on this picture, but Microsoft Office 365 was the first cloud element to the networks that we started dealing with 2014, 2015, with a bit of cloud backup there with complete recovery. But in addition to that now, I went and had a look at where else small businesses might store their data, and picked a number of sort of well-known systems that small businesses might use. But again, just if you're talking about your file data, so me creating a Word document, we Complete IT use Microsoft OneDrive and the Microsoft 365 stack, but other businesses will have Dropbox. They'll use that for sharing. They'll have Box. They'll have, as I mentioned, OneDrive, SharePoint, Google Drives, and this is just where one document could be stored. So here, where likely all your documents are going to be on that file and print server, and with a bit of resilience on another one, we've gone from one place of storing it and it backed up to this is just a big mix of everything. And again, we're not just talking about data, we're talking about, personal data, we're talking about your commercial data, anything that is valuable to you data-wise. So where we look at applying tools to it, we've gone from a very small footprint that's effectively in your cupboard to a worldwide footprint that anybody can access from anywhere, which is great for remote working. And during the last year or 9 months, 10 months, being able to work remotely easily has been really critical, more so than it ever was. But it just means you've got to do so much more to make sure you're secure, you're safe, and you're not put at risk as a business. And what we'll talk about today is information security in general. And I'll dig into what I mean in that in a more, but there's the CIA triad of information security. It sounds all very American, but the idea is that for all the data you have, be that personal data, be that your intellectual property, be that anything to do with your brand, you want to make sure, A, it's kept confidential where sensible, B, the integrity of that data cannot be questioned, and C, it is available as and when you need it. I mean, most people find it easy to think about in terms of personal data because we all had GDPR beaten into us. But your data on your staff, you're going to want to keep confidential. You're going to want to make sure that no one there can play around with the salaries of different people inappropriately, and that when you need it, it's there for you. So with all the context of all of this, we're looking at maintaining these three key elements to it. And then we can put a number of controls into place. And the controls really fall into three categories. Sometimes this is four, sometimes it's three. But people, so what we can do to manage our people. The technology, again, we often reference it, is cybersecurity, but it is much more than that, the technologies you can put in place. And we'll touch on some of those today as well. And then the other part of it is that this is sometimes split out into two: processes and policies that you have as an organization to ensure the CIA of data. So information security as a whole encompasses all of these things, and cybersecurity fits as a part of that. Data protection fits as a part of that. So again, with things like accreditation such as ISO 27001, you're not just looking at technology as a cybersecurity as a technology tool. You look at all of these. So again, what we'll come to today is some of the technology tools you can put into place, but also some of the other people and process stuff that you can put into place to make sure, again, you're protected nicely. And again, if you have it in your mind, 1/3 of what you're doing is managing your people, 1/3 of what you're doing is using technology to protect you, and the other third is around policy and process. It's a really good way of balancing out how, as a business, you sort of operate and the risks you might take. So there's a number of things you need to understand before we even start down this journey, and it's the what, where, who, why, when of your information in general. So what information do you have? Where is it stored? Who has access to it? Why do you have it in the first place? And when was it last used? And then what we'll go into is how you can protect yourself on each of these categories with a number of different ways of doing so. So first of all, we're talking about what data you have. And again, people get, because of GDPR, people always think, oh, personal data. But actually, that's not always just the most valuable data in your business. People pay more attention to it because of the fact that if it goes wrong and it gets leaked or there's a breach of personal data, there are fines associated with it. But actually, we'll go through some of these now. So data about your customers, their preferences and needs, that's potentially their personal data about them. So again, you're looking after it on their behalf because they've shared it with you. There could be some, ignoring the fines element, there could be some reputational damage to you as a business should this leak. So again, understanding what of your customers' data you have is really important. And an example, again, data about your team is the same way. You're going to be holding much more sensitive data around your team, like their salaries and their performance. It's not personally identifiable data, but it's very personally sensitive data that, again, if it leaked out, could cause you A, financial penalties, but B, a reputation as an employer. Your likes of Experian, not Experian, the other Equifax, for example. Would you want to go to Equifax knowing that their information security when they had a big breach last year was terrible? I wouldn't. And then you've got other data that you want to protect, so about how you operate as a business. And that's financial data, that's your processes, that's effectively how you do what you do. And would you want your customers finding that out? Sorry, your competitors finding that out? Again, supply chain, very similar thing. If you've got certain agreements in place around how you deal with your supply chain that gives you an edge over someone else, well, that's really valuable to you. And then the biggest ones, again, if you've got intellectual property, that you've got a system or you've got a way of doing something. I mean, good old KFC gravy, for example, is always the best one. If that got out and because it wasn't protected, you'd probably lose business. You may go out of business. So protecting that is really important, and finally, and understanding what data you have around that is really important. And finally, and a much more of a recent one is the data you can preen out of social media and your marketing, because again, if your marketing strategy or your marketing list got into someone else's hands, again, that's going to be a cost to you. So really understanding what data you have is really important. And then this only really looks at the visible data. We won't go into it too much detail today, but dark data. And by dark data, what we're talking about is it's there, but you don't really know about it. So a really good example is if in the past your team used Dropbox, but now you use OneDrive, is the old data still in Dropbox? Is it managed? Is it looked after? Could it be shared? Because something happened to that data you don't know. But because it's not visible, do you care about it? But it's still there. And actually, if you had a breach of the dark data, what damage could that do? So we won't dig into that anymore, but you always need to be careful. There's the data you can see that you have as a business. There's the data you can't see that you have as a business. And I think the estimate is most businesses, only 33% of the data they actually have is visible data. So then we've come to the conclusion, we know what data we have. The next step is then to know where that data is stored. So you've seen the infinite number of online SaaS platforms that there are now. But again, you also have it stored on your file server. You have it on your desktops and laptops. You have it on portable media, USB hard drives, all these sort of things. And these are all places that you need to know where that data is stored, because actually that is really important. If you've got your business critical stuff sat on a laptop and that laptop's not backed up, if that laptop goes bang, what happens to the business? So it's really having a good map out of where it is stored. The next piece is then, and it coincides with the previous two, understanding what data you have and understanding where it is. It's who then has access to it. So the top two categories are always employees and ex-employees, because within most companies have their company folder structure. You'll put access controls in place in that to prevent people from accessing B if they only need access to A. But also, if you have levers and you don't remove access to that, there's a real problem there. And back in the day of everything being on premise, it was easy. They leave the building, they can't access anything. Well, now it doesn't matter where you are in the world. So having a really good understanding of where your data is means you can remove access to it if they leave. But then also you've got the additional things like contractors you might have working for you, managing what they can and can't see, third parties who might be working with you on your systems or be one of your customers. There's an infinite number of third parties. And finally, the actual software providers themselves. So in most of our cases, we're talking Microsoft. Microsoft are a software provider. They will have access to your data. And regardless of where that data is stored in the world, realistically, Microsoft is an American company. So you could say, because it's an American company, that the NSA would have access to it. And that's one of the things that most people really forget. And there's a common misconception. Just because your data is stored in the EU or UK going forwards when the new year arrives, it doesn't mean it's not accessed from outside the EU. Because actually, if you need advanced Microsoft support, it's likely to be their team in America, which means the people in America have access to that data to help support you. You can lock it down, you can have data, encrypt it, so even if it goes to America, it can't be seen, but then there are support implications. So a real common misconception, and it is a real big discussion point around Brexit, especially around what happens with GDPR and our relationship with the United States, is just because it's stored in the EU doesn't mean it won't be accessed from outside. So again, when you put your contracts together, it's definitely something to think about. And then finally, the two, why do you have the data, sorry, and when did you last use it? So why do you have the data? Do you really need that employee's record that left 10 years ago? So that whole sort of encompasses actually, well, it's actually two parts. There's 6 key principles under GDPR of why you might process data. These are 2 of them. So data minimization is really that you should only keep the absolute minimum of what you need, and you don't keep it forever. So build something out that says our HR data, we example, keep for 6 years after that person's left. After 6 years, it should be gone. We have no reason to keep it. And again, the idea is with when and why, is if you get compromised and something that is still really valuable from 10 years ago is stolen, well, it's still really valuable, so it's still been stolen. And it's the sort of really minimizing that footprint. So now we understand where our data is, what we've got, who has access to it, why we have it in the first place, because sometimes we don't understand why we've got it. And finally, when did we last use it? We can then look at now how we can start to protect it. So I'll cover a few bits now that are cybersecurity and general data protection pieces. So the first thing to do is to allow you to help understand all those previous ones is create a record of data processing. And there are loads and loads of templates online that you can find. Now, it's actually a legal requirement under GDPR, but we've expanded ours, for example, Complete IT, to not just be the personal data that we have on all the different data subjects we have, but also all the data we hold. Because although it might not be sensitive in terms of personal data, if it got out into the public, our competitors might use it against us, or it might cause us reputational damage. So the record of data processing basically, in a summary, sums up what data you have, and you have a record of what that data is. And it's about documenting what that risk to you is, again, as well. So if that data got into the wrong hands, what type of risk would we be talking about? If it was personal data, would it be financial? If it was intellectual property, would it be commercial? So you get a really good understanding of what you hold and what the damage would be if it got out. Because that you then move on to the next piece, which is called information asset register. And I've just put a little screenshot of ours on there. So again, these are all the places that you might store any of this data. We've added quite a bit more to ours to give us ideas of where it's hosted, who's responsible for it. So again, the idea is we use Suzanne as a HR system internally. Our head of HR is responsible for Suzanne. So again, in the event of an issue or a breach with Suzanne, and we know what's in Suzanne because we've got a record of data processing that says we have all this information on our staff in Suzanne, I would be working with our head of HR to understand what's gone wrong and what we need to go and do about it. So again, you've got this 7th principle within GDPR is accountability. This gives you accountability. You know where your data is, and you know what's in it. And it is really, really key, especially as we're starting to spread that information and data that we have further and further outside of our offices. So that's number 2. Record where your data is, getting classified by system risk. Suzanne, for example, will be really high risk for us. But if Brightgauge went down, for example, for a few hours, it wouldn't be a problem for us in practice. The third one is then review who can access what. So a real good bit of housekeeping, should always do, is review every system you have on a regular basis to see who has access to what and what they can do. And the idea is you work on something called a principle of least privilege. If you don't need access to it, don't give them access to it. So as an example, I might be the quality and compliance director at Complete IT, but I have no access to our server rooms because actually I have no need to go into them for my job. Only our IT team does that. But also, that was the old school days of physical kit in cupboards. But we use a system called ConnectWise as our CRM system and help desk system. I had one of our help manager at the moment, and one of our help desk managers asked me this morning, could you do a report for me because I can't have access to it? The answer was no. I can get you the report, but you don't need that in your day-to-day job because this is only a one-off. And again, it can cause some challenges around actual working practices. And the whole idea is that whenever you're putting in a information security framework, it always has to be the balance between security and availability. because if you secure everything down too much, it's not available for people to do their jobs. And if you don't secure it down too much, if you don't secure it down enough, people have far too much availability, which again means that they can be taken advantage of. Another key bit is around that starter, leaver, and change of role process. So a leaver goes, we know what systems to remove them from and when they need to be removed by. But change of role is the one that often catches people out, because if someone moves within a company and still has access to everything they previously did, that's a bit of a problem in terms of, actually, there might be a bad reason they've moved. They might be unhappy with the move, and they've got the potential to do some damage, which is not what you want. So actually making this really easy by having a set of standard access rights is great. So we have a number of standard roles at Complete IT you'll all be aware of: help desk team members, our Complete IT managers, our account managers. We have a standard list of what they should and shouldn't have access to when they change roles, join us, leave us, etc. So we can record and we know what they're going to have access to. And actually any additional requests that come through, Laura might need access to this system for this purpose, we have a designated gatekeeper, which is actually our HR department. And we keep the gatekeeper separate from our IT team for a very good reason. And it is about the segregation of duties, that the person giving the person access can't do it themselves. There has to be that effectively multi-factor authentication within it. So person A can only access the data if it's agreed by HR and then actioned by IT. Having the IT as the person agreeing and doing it is a conflict of interest. So we work out, we as Complete IT use our HR department for that. But having that standard set of accesses, a lot of what we get as well is when a lot of people join, we get requests to set up a new user, copy this person, which is fine, because at 99 out of 100, that person's accesses are exactly correct. And we'll act under that instruction. But again, over time, these things do creep, these things evolve. And we have seen it in the past where someone's profiles have changed to give access to stuff they didn't previously have. We've copied that to new users as requested, and it meant they've got the access they shouldn't really have. So again, regular review of who has access to what, and create some standard processes, standard types of access. That really helps. Next one is have a data retention policy. Now you understand what data you've got and why you've got it. Have it for as long as you need it. And if you don't need it, delete it. If it's gone, it's gone. Hopefully it means it's been deleted securely enough that it can't come back and bite you. So again, but when you're doing this, be aware of legal obligations. There are HR legal obligations. There are financial legal obligations, because we're not just talking personal data, we're talking all data that we have. Our financial data, I think we keep for 6-7 years. And after that, if we don't need it, it goes. So it's really understanding, again, what data you have and therefore what your legal obligations are, if there are any. And just as a point, the added bonus, all 4 of these things, not 3 things, the added bonus is if, for example, you get a subject access request, and we're seeing a lot of them coming into our clients at the moment, or if you get breached, I hate the word breached, but it's sort of a good description. You know, oh, this system has been compromised by a third party. We have this, that. It's related to these people, and we have it for a legitimate reason. And again, when subject access request, if your data retention policy says you keep all the personal data about them for 6 years, and after that you delete it. If at 6 years, one day they do a subject access request, which they could do, you can go, no, it's all deleted. It's in line with our retention policy. So again, this has been heavily data focused, but actually we aren't talking just personal data. We are talking all forms of data. So this really is focused on that policy, process, and people management piece. The next piece is then around training, and more training. I can't emphasize how much you need to do training. So again, training your team on information security principles, what to look out for, what breaches to see, spotting phishing attacks is another one at the moment, and we'll come to a little bit around that later on. Training your team in data protection, GDPR in general, and more importantly, again, with people being more dispersed and not having the person next to them to ask, what you do if you see X, Y, Z happening. Because actually, how would you know someone's got into your emails unless you, for example, got someone emailed you to say, I've been getting these random emails from you. What simple things can you do to sort of check it? And again, that really works well for phishing. We'll come on to that one. Just as a note for all of our Complete IT clients that are on the call, we actually provide 25 licenses free of charge for a solution with complete training, but something called Micro, for all of our clients for up to 25 users. And it includes a massive section on cybersecurity in general, and things like spotting phishing attacks, security, but there's also loads more stuff in it, like just, for example, guides on using Microsoft Teams, how to use Teams, how to use Word, Excel, etc. So, okay, that's not particularly relevant for today, but you have that resource available to you. And again, if you would like access to it, have a chat with your account manager or a technical consultant, they can arrange that for you. So moving on to the more cybersecurity ones, cybersecurity tools. So what we want to do, I've broken this down into two, really: the physical devices, physical things, and then sort of cloud software, cloud systems. So what can you do to protect yourself, the physical devices themselves? So what you, again, for those, a lot of businesses still have a lot of kit on site. Make sure you can't let those threat actors get through the front door. Get yourself a proper business grade firewall. They're designed to stop people coming in the front door. They're designed as your bouncers. There are a lot out there, but make sure we're talking a proper business grade one. I've seen open sourced software ones. Avoid, the honest answer. Again, traditional, you just have antivirus on your laptops and desktops. But again, back in the day, when you used to take your laptop home, you'd have to bring it into the office to make sure that antivirus would update. We're not in that world anymore. So there are tools, the antivirus tools, they've changed. They track behaviors now. They watch patterns of activity as opposed to just constantly scanning for dodgy files. You've got your malware protection tools. So those applications that are legitimate applications that are doing illegitimate things. And then you've got newer tools such as auto isolation. So again, you accidentally click that email, your laptop starts to get encrypted with ransomware. There are tools now that can automatically isolate that device from the network, and therefore that ransomware can't spread. So again, there are lots of endpoint security tools, and by endpoint security, we're talking your laptops, desktops, and having as many layers of protection in there, because actually, hopefully, one will be 99% secure. They'll never be 100%, because that's the whole reason there's a criminal enterprise around this. And hopefully, the 99% here, the 99% there, the 99% there will add up to as close to as much protection as you could get. Next one is to ensure that if your device falls into wrong hands, it's protected. And encryption is that. Again, you accidentally leave your laptop on a train, it's fully encrypted. Regardless of what's on it, you can be pretty comfortable that that data is not accessible. And that also goes for things like USB sticks, for portable hard drives. They're the easiest things to lose, and 99% of the time they're never encrypted, so they're the easiest things to get into. So always think encryption every opportunity. And finally, keep your devices up to date. Not just Microsoft. Everybody sort of thinks about patches on the server and patches on the laptop means you need to have a reboot, etc., etc. But your Google Chromes, your Adobe Acrobats, all the applications and systems that you run on your laptop all need to be patched, and they all need to be kept up to date, because where a hole can be found in them, then it can be it can be exploited. So again, the key piece, and not a huge lot changed with this over the last several years. It is just really about the additional bits that now can be done. So again, antivirus, as an example, used to be you had to be in the office and it was scanned for dodgy files. It's now mainly cloud-based, managed. The cloud updates automatically and are pushed out regardless of where you are in the world. So firewalls, endpoint protection, encryption, and patching are the real key pieces to protect your physical devices. And then moving on to more the system side, software side, I can't emphasize enough multi-factor authentication. We'll come to a stat in a minute that is quite shocking, in all honesty, but always make sure you enable multi-factor authentication. And where you have, most people, for example, Microsoft have multi-factor authentication. You can turn it on so your emails are protected by it. But a lot of systems that you can also use will have it and have multi-factor authentication available to you. So anywhere you store data, try and have it multi-factor authenticated. Our policy is as Complete IT, if the vendor of that product has it, we enable it, end of. And then you can also enable things like single sign-on, where it's possible to do so. So again, we've built out our internal systems as an example. So when someone logs into their laptop, our key line of business applications that we use know they've authenticated to get into their laptop. So again, it automatically authenticates them against, for example, ConnectWise. And where that's really, really helpful is about managing all these applications. Single sign-ons, a lot of people will know as SSO. But the idea is if someone leaves, I remove their account in one place, and they can't have access to anything else. So if you forget, oh no, I forgot that system that I didn't remove their access from it. If it's part of this single sign-on SSO, where it's possible, it will mean their access has gone anyway. And there are more recently, very recently, advanced email filtering solutions that can also now help protect you against phishing attacks, because actually there is an actual cost to a lot of these, and it's because unfortunately people fall for them and send money to different places. Ideally, we'd all have that human two-factor authentication. If you get asked to pay an invoice, you actually go and ask the person themselves that asking it, but unfortunately a lot of these do fall through. So an example we had last week, actually, I run a simulated phishing attack on Complete IT. I actually had to get our IT team to turn off our email filtering, specifically with the phishing stuff, because it blocks that, and even though that was a simulation. So there are tools out there now that are available, and again, have a chat with your technical consultant and account manager if you would like to look at these in a bit more detail. And a couple of last things then, really, they're the 7 things, or there's many, many more things in there, the 7 key categories of things you can do. Again, things like multi-factor authentication, if you've got Office 365, you already paid for it. So hopefully there's no real big costs in there, which is great. And I thought a couple of stats. So we have to record, and we record internally, where we think Complete IT data has been put at risk because of an incident at one of our clients. We have to do that as under GDPR, because we need to protect our own data and ensure our own data is secure. And with my compliance hat on, I do a bit of analysis of this every month. And I've worked out that approximately 90% of the breaches that we see at our clients could have been prevented by multi-factor authentication. And this is typically people breaking into Office 365 accounts and people getting into remote desktop servers. 90% could have been, and I say could potentially have been prevented by multi-factor authentication, because I'll take you through one of the latest trends that unfortunately we started to see. And secondly, the second factor is that the ICO each quarter report on breaches that happen and get reported to them. And in the last quarter, 35% of breaches were caused by phishing attacks. So, I mean, we push out through our social media quite a lot around protecting yourselves from phishing, what sort of education you can do with your teams about spotting phishing attacks. And actually, I'll show you one very shortly as an additional piece. So again, that staggering, that stat, 35%, it didn't exist a few years ago. And you could get it heard, pardon me, you get it referred to as CEO phishing, etc., but it is the impersonation of someone else who's hopefully trusted, which means you go and do something you shouldn't do. So one of the latest ways of tricking you, and I wrote this slide and then had to add clients could potentially have prevented. Well, unfortunately, one of the trends we've seen just recently is people calling up about multi-factor authentication. Now, I'll give you what I mean by this. So whenever you have your multi-factor authentication on your phone, you'll often get a prompt that says, you log into a website, you get a prompt on your phone to say, was this you? There are a couple of methods of doing this. There's the approve deny access, which is the one I've got on the screen, which is actually, that's, for example, us getting into our remote desktop server. There's also the ones like the Microsoft one where they put a couple of numbers up on. And there's also another one where you just put effectively a number in that you read on the device. What we're seeing at the moment is maybe me as a threat actor is trying to log into someone's office, someone's account, and it pushes out a multi-factor authentication thing like this one. And what they do is they have the telephone number of that person and ring them and say to them, you've had a prompt up on your screen, could you approve it for me? At which point they're into that system and have free reign because that multi-factor authentication has been approved. Now, the long-term real suggestion around this is that they might look to phase out, technology comes to phase out approve, deny, because you see something and go approve, you don't really know what it means. But when you see numbers, we're all conditioned from being young that you don't give out PIN numbers. So we're conditioned for numbers, not approve, deny. So the suggestion is over time, they'll all move over to, so all multi-factor authentication will become numbers based. Because then if someone does ring you up going, can you tell me the number on your screen, please? Hopefully the human instinct to not give out numbers will kick in. But again, it's never going to be foolproof because unfortunately we are human and we are the weakest link in all of this. So that's really sort of relevant now. And again, a bit around your team is, if you have a prompt come up on your screen and you're not expecting it, question why it's come up. Don't just click yes. Don't just click no. Don't do anything with it. If someone calls you up asking about it, that person needs to stop and think, why have I got this? Sometimes it's an error. Sometimes, like the example we had the other day, someone genuinely thought it was okay to click approve, and it cost them. And finally, the other one is the business is now getting to know their victims before they go phishing. So I saw an example the other day. Someone's account had been compromised, and there was a big long email chain in one email, and that email chain was really well written, and it was written as though the people in that email chain had actually written it. They hadn't. It was just all free text that was made to look like an email, but they got to know the victim first, and they were patient. Where usually it used to be phishing attacks used to be hit and run. If you made some money, great. If not, oh well, move on to the next one. Now they're spending time and investment in actually doing it because the payoffs are much better. So again, I've highlighted a few things in this one as an example that I tried and tested internally. Rebecca is a trusted member of our team, but that's not her email address. The incentive here around winning a PS5 is fantastic, especially going into Christmas. The links, when you hovered over that link, it was a very weird website. But what actually is really key about this email itself is that text is written as though Rebecca has written it. We have a phrase, terminology in Complete IT, head over to the hub to learn more. People read that and thought, oh, that must be Rebecca. Didn't click, because these phishers are now learning how businesses talk to each other. Who are the important people? That chain of command to get approval for A, B, and C. So they're getting cleverer, more clever. So again, having the right tools in place is really big. And those are the real two latest ones. Are ways of getting around multi-factor authentication and tricking you and being very, very clever about it. There is no denying that. So again, that's where the training of the team come in, because unfortunately, we as individuals are always the weakest link. You can have every piece of technology in place as possible, but unfortunately, the criminals will find a way around it to exploit our weaknesses as people. So hopefully that's covered off what everybody joined today to see and hear and learn about. So if there's any questions, I think there's a couple that have popped up. And Jess, did you want to have a look through?
Yeah, so we've got a couple in here. You mentioned micro for Complete IT clients, but I'm not a Complete IT client. Are there any other solutions you would recommend or ways of training our team?
Yeah, there are a lot of off-the-shelf products out there. So specifically for GDPR training, we use a tool by a company called OneTrust. Although they specialize in privacy, they've got quite a lot of content in there as well. And that's one of the ones we use internally. My plan is early next year is to have a look at these other platforms as well with some of this specialist training. I really like OneTrust, but they're upgrading their systems at the moment. So, but again, if you do online searches, you'll find a lot. I've used personally, I've forgotten the name of them now. There's lots of QA courses, but again, these are expensive courses that you send on. The reason we love Micro is because it's lots of snippets of really good information. But again, you can do a quick Google search and you will find quite a lot of solutions out there. I'm not sure if we can resell Micro. to non-complete IT cards. I've never had the question, to be fair, but it's something we can definitely explore if you'd ever find interested.
We've also got across the Complete IT site, we've got resources pages and blogs and things. So if you are interested in learning more about phishing emails or sort of educating your teams around those areas, there's absolutely tons of content that's all very current on there, which you're more than welcome to share. And the next one, with two-factor authentication, is this something I can turn on across the whole business? So I guess across all of the different solutions rather than individually?
Yes, so you can do it. Oh, pardon me. You can do it as a blanket. So, for example, Office 365, you can turn it on for everyone that has an Office 365 account. And we'd always recommend that purely because then you know you've got the chance of a weak link being found is less. But again, it all depends. For other systems, it all depends on what they are. So Sage 50, for example, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. They may, for example, offer multi-factor authentication. And again, as I'd always recommend, getting it turned on.
Okay, this is actually the last one in here. So if anyone else has got any they want to send over using the Q&A.
I've just spotted in the chat and apologise. The quality of my microphone might have been a bit off, so apology. Yeah, possibly Andrew on my chin probably was rubbing on it. So sorry about that. But yeah, any other questions? Feel free to send them in to myself and Jess afterwards, and I'll happily help where I can.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And I think we'll. I'm not sure what Jess will do, but either send out the copy of the presentation or put it on our website. Yeah,
so I'll send out a copy of the recording and the presentation alongside it to everyone that registered. Thank you.
Lovely. Oh, we had another question come through. Oh no, thank you. Lovely. If we don't speak to everyone, have a great Christmas. Oh,
we have got another one coming.
Oh yes. How would you roll out multi-factor authentication when multiple staff are working remotely? It can be done. So you can, for example, if you have an Office 365, you can turn it on, your Office 365 tenant. And then typically what we'd always recommend is you either do a webinar showing people how to use it, or there can be little how-to guides created on what to expect, what to see, what to do, using, for example, the Microsoft app, what you would expect to see on the Microsoft app when you get that authentication. So it's always used to be much easier. You could get a few people together and show them. But now, once you can either turn it on, do some training, or just do the training and turn it on. A lot of people are quite familiar with a lot of this, more so than we often give people credit for, because actually banks have been doing this for quite a long time. So there are means that it is just about putting your arm around your users and saying, the reason why we're doing it, I know it can be a pain sometimes, but this is how you go and do it. And hopefully it won't upset anyone, because the main feedback we get is that people don't want to install apps on their phones. Well, the Microsoft Authenticator app isn't a specific work app, as an example, and banks, etc., will be using it going forwards as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Lovely. Thank you all, and have a great Christmas and New Year.